Hey guys, coming to you live. Well, it won't be live when you see it anymore, when it's on video, but coming to you from the corner of Wilshire and La Brea, the old Asahi beer building that no longer says Asahi on the top. Anyway, I really need you guys to help me figure out a conundrum that I'm having. Back in the early 80s, and it was actually, I think it was 1984 now that I think of it, not 1983. So when I say 1983 in the video, it's only because 1983 is one of the most righteous years of my childhood. But 1984 is the Big Brother book year. That's the Big Brother book year, and that's when one of my favorite movies came out. But anyway, I remember hearing this new song, this brandy new song on the radio that I could swear was Emerson, Lake and Palmer. And the reason that I remember it is because I kept remembering it in my head and repeating it to myself as Emerson, Lincoln Palmer. Sounds like a law firm, doesn't it? Anyway, so I repeated it to myself until I could get home or get to a place where I could write it down. We didn't have cell phones. We couldn't text them to ourselves then. And I could have sworn it was by this band. But turns out I was wrong. Anyway, watch and let me know what you think and hopefully enjoy. All right, peace out. Okay, so I'm really hoping you guys can help me with this. I need help to know if you remember the song and who sang it, and if they had any other songs in the early 80s. Runner is born. Don't look back. You've been there. Okay, I won't ruin it for you. Okay, so I totally remember that song from my youth, and the first time I heard it, I was like, oh my god, who is this? Who is this? And I would later find out that it was going to be in one of my absolute favorite movies of the early 80s. But we'll get to that in a second. But I looked it up, and it says it's a song called Runner. And I always remember it as The Runner, but that's kind of neither here nor there, only because it could be. I mean, it could be Runner or The Runner. The thes aren't very important in the grand scheme of things, usually, unless you remember it, like Interview with a Vampire versus Interview with the Vampire, or like if the Who was suddenly called Who, or the Ramones. That's another big one, because my best friend was like a really big fan of the Ramones, and then we found out like a couple years ago it was just Ramones, and we were just both gobsmacked. So anyway, I just, the song popped into my head the other night, as songs do when all of a sudden I hear a sound that sounds like the song, and then the song will pop into my head. And I looked it up because I could swear it was by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But no, it was by this group called Manfred Mann's Earth Band. Now, Manfred Mann's Earth Band does sound familiar to me. But it was also in one of my absolute favorite movies from the early 80s, 1983, The Philadelphia Experiment. Oh, here. You gotta get the full screen, otherwise it's not the full experience. But anyway, it was in my absolutely favorite movie from the early 80s. And there was just a scene where they were like driving in a car and stuff. And it was like the coolest thing ever. And I just totally remember it as having been sung by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. So I did this whole thing you do when you search for other sounds of like, okay, if Emerson, Lake and Palmer wasn't the band that I heard The Runner from, if that was not the same band, then I had to have heard a song sung by Emerson, Lake and Palmer around circa 1983 that would have had to have been a song that I must have associated with Manfred Mann's band. So, or Manfred Mann's Earth Band. I always just say Manfred Mann's band. So anyway, I started like picking out sounds in my own head. As you do, it's like my whole head became full of like trying to scrounge for memories, kind of like you do when you're desperate. Once I stepped in dog poop outside my chiropractor's office, and all of a sudden all these images started scrolling through my brain like flip cards, like, oh my god, where's an outdoor spigot, where's an outdoor water spigot? And all of a sudden I remembered, just like I saw the shadow on the wall, I saw the spigot. There was a spigot, and I had only been behind my chiropractor's office once. There was a spigot behind his office, and I was like, oh my god, yes, I can clean the dog poop off my shoe back there, because my bus is about to come in like 5 minutes. So anyway, your brain can do amazing things when you're totally desperate, and I have a feeling that that's what happens when people get hypnotized, like that they have to remember exactly what they saw in front of them that day. Anyway, I'm going off on a tonal tangent, but my brain started doing flip cards, like, and it started doing flip sounds, and it started like making voices in my head like C-3PO when you turn them back on. Anyway, so it started doing all these sounds, and then I landed on the song Blinded by the Light. Blinded by the light, wrapped up like a deuce, another runner in the night. And it talks about runners too. And I could have sworn that was an Emerson, Lake and Palmer song, but it was not. It was also Manfred Mann's Earth Band. And then I decided to look for, like, what were some of Emerson, Lake and Palmer's greatest hits, and did any come out in the early 80s? And or did any albums come out in the early 80s? So I looked, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, 10 essential songs. Okay, Lucky Man, 1970s. Nope. Barbarian, 1970. Tarkus, 1971. Plus, I've never heard any of these songs. From the Beginning, 1972. Hoedown, 1972. Very 70s and very oaky, and they don't sound anything like Manfred Mann's when I went and listened to them. They almost sound kind of like Yes mixed with country, mixed with like the Oak Ridge Boys, Elvira. No, I'm kidding. Oh my god. If I had a Mandela effect about the Oak Ridge Boys, I would be cracking up. I've always wanted to have a Mandela effect about the Oak Ridge Boys because I don't care about them one way or the other. But anyway, oh my god, the Oak Ridge Boys. I can make fun of them for days. Okay, Toccata, 1973. It's like, and I think these are all chronological. Carn Evil 9. Supposedly, Carn Evil 9 is like one of their biggest hits. And I listened to it, I have no idea. And some of them, once I listened to them, I did. But they're just not really the kind of music that I would be into. Fanfare for the Common Man now. That I didn't listen to, but that is a really great classical piece by Aaron Copland, which I'm sure some of you know of. But yeah, so anyway, I looked up their discography. I'm not going to bore you with a screenshot of that. If you want, you can look them up too. But it was weird because when I looked up their discography, it's like all of their albums, practically all of their albums were made in the 1970s, and then there was just a respite. There were no albums being made, and then I started seeing albums coming out in the 90s and then in the 2000s, but of course that could have been, oh god, the page is alive, it's readjusting. Rolling Stone, you cad. But anyway, there was nothing, it's like they came out with nothing in the 80s. It's like there was apparently, oh god, so weird. So apparently there's this lost song from the early 80s there's this lost song from the early 80s by Emerson, Lake and Palmer that I thought was Manfred Mann's, that I thought was in the Philadelphia Experiment, that I thought was about a runner, or a deuce or a douche running in the night. I don't know. But anyway, it's weird. So what I need help with you guys from is basically, I need you to tell me if you remember any Emerson, Lake and Palmer songs being released in the 80s, or if you know, I love that, if you know of any Emerson, Lake and Palmer songs that I should know of. Because apparently there's a missing Emerson, Lake and Palmer song in my repertoire. No, not in my repertoire. That's not the word I was looking for. And apparently I'm missing a word for repertoire that means something else. But anyway, I just need to know because it's driving me nuts. Like, why would I know of an Emerson, Lake and Palmer song that I never knew about? And look, there's the Wizard of Oz. Nobody's got a gun, and that's a perfect place to leave it off. Anyway, you guys, this is driving me crazy. If you could help me, that would be so, so helpful. Well, that's redundant. And other than that, tell me what you think, tell me what you know, and peace out.